Windows 95 really was an operating system that changed the world. Launched on a beautiful summer's day in August of 1995 at Microsoft's Redmond campus, we'd never seen a software launch on this scale before. Prior to Windows 95, only computer enthusiasts and geeks were really interested in operating systems, and back then, you'd generally buy them from the back pages of computer magazines, or usually just wait until you got a new computer. But the launch of Windows 95 was really something else, hyped up with a $300 million marketing campaign, $3 million of which went to license the Rolling Stones Start Me Up song to announce the new Start menu feature. They also commissioned a cheesy sitcom promotional video starring the biggest TV stars of the day, Jennifer Aniston and Matthew Perry, at the height of their Friends fame. There were launch events held all around the world, with the main one in the US being hosted by another huge TV star of the day, Jay Leno. Literally no expenses were spared with the launch of Windows 95.
Well, Windows 95 is so easy, even a talk show host can figure it out.
Okay, you got your taskbar, let's go right down there. Little taskbar there, you can click on there, you see, and I can change my mind. Do I go over here? This one too. I can change my mind faster than Bill Clinton. Look at that, huh? Healthcare, no healthcare. Republican today, Democrat tomorrow. Sure, there you go. Just flip it back and forward. Back and forward. Easy as pie-ola. That's a technical term.
And it was also the start of midnight launches in the software industry, something that today is common if you get a big new video game release, but we'd never seen people lining up around the block to be the first people to get their hands on a new operating system before, and they actually sold 7 million copies in the first 5 weeks. And for me, Windows 95 has got some quite strong personal memories as well. Now, as you may know from watching my channel before, at the time I was an Amiga user at home, and to be honest I thought, compared to the Amiga's operating system, Windows 3.1 was a bit of a joke. But when 95 came along, it really did feel like it had caught up with features in many ways. Stuff like full preemptive multitasking, plug and play being included, admittedly needing much more RAM and storage than Amiga OS, but it was such a big improvement over 3.1. And at my school, we had 4 Windows 3.1 machines in the library that were hooked up to the internet, and you could get time on them if you booked it out in hourly blocks. But then, I remember coming back after the summer holidays, and we had Windows 95 installed on all the PCs in the library, and suddenly every one of them was internet connected, and you could literally just stay on the internet at every spare opportunity you had, and it really was something else. So 25 years later, I thought we'd have a nostalgic look back at Windows 95, and also a bit later on in this video, find out if it's possible for me to do my day job today using Windows 95. Now to start, I thought as a bit of a curiosity, we'd take a look at the earliest version of Windows 95 that I could find. Now this is from August of 1993, when it was still called Windows Chicago, and that was the code name for the beta versions. And this one we've got here is Build 58S. Now there are some people that claim there are some earlier versions floating around, but other people reckon they're fake, so for me this is the earliest verified one that I could find. And as you can see on booting it up, we've got that very mid-90s style 3D rendered font, and then when it loads up we get that GeoCities style under construction wallpaper. And that is actually very telling about the time that this was released and Microsoft's thinking around that stage, and we'll talk a bit more about that soon. But as you can see, there are a few instant obvious differences between this beta build from almost 2 years before the release of Windows 95 and the eventual operating system that we got. And we've got Dr. Watson running, minimised on the desktop on boot. Of course, that's a Windows debugger, very useful to have there in a beta. And the start menu's there, although it does look a lot smaller, and if we click it there is a lot less on it as well. Instead of it being a list of the installed programs, it's really just a selection of shortcuts for commands. So we can run something from the command line, or we have an early version of the task manager called Task List like it was in Windows 3.1, but weirdly you can actually launch programs from in here as well. And looking at the list of what's installed, you can see that Windows 95 marked the move from 16-bit to 32-bit And there are actually a couple of versions of some programs for each, like we've got Clock and Clock 32 and Notepad, and there are lots of other familiar programs from Windows 3.1 and later Windows 95 in here as well. And next to the Start menu there's a couple of other buttons. One's like a search and recent used list. And the third icon just brings up the Windows help information and also the About screen as well. And you can see there's actually a program docked above it. Now this is because in this build, when you minimize windows, they just sit on top of the taskbar rather than minimizing to it. And you can actually drag these minimized programs around, quite like Windows 3.1, but then we've got lots of white unused space in the taskbar at the bottom as well. So I guess the minimize to taskbar feature was already planned, just not implemented at this stage. And speaking of the taskbar, that can be dragged around and repositioned around the screen. You can stick it to the sides, or you can even drop it in the middle, and it turns into more of a traditional window that you can then have floating anywhere. And as you can see from the desktop, we've got no My Computer icon. Instead, we've got something called File Cabinet that does pretty much the same thing. At opening File Cabinet, you can see your drives from here, and looking around the window, you can notice the Explorer window gadgets are a lot more like Windows 3.1 in their position and style. And instead of accessing programs from the Start menu, you've actually got a Programs folder on the desktop, and if you double click that, you can see all the install programs in there. So there's not really much more that we can do in Chicago, but I thought it might be quite a curiosity and quite interesting to see its earliest roots and how it developed over those 2 years before it got released. But now, let's boot into actual Windows 95. And it's hard to remember just how much of a change and a revolution Windows 95 really was for PC users, and how much of an improvement it was over Windows 3.1. For $89, it did feel like you got a new computer. And there were some really big changes. For example, no separate program manager anymore, no windows inside Windows, a much cleaner user interface, and of course the Start button to access your programs and documents. That was such a user interface revolution that you still find similar menus today in so many Linux distributions, and even Microsoft couldn't kill off the Start menu, try as they might in Windows 8. And of course you got the taskbar where you can minimize files to as well. And a lot of these user interface principles are still with us 25 years later. We've got My Computer to navigate and manipulate files. And Plug and Play was new as well, or Plug and Pray as it was originally nicknamed, due to the fact that it didn't always work as promised, but it was infinitely preferable to having to manually configure IRQ addresses and DMA channels. And there were a few demos of the multimedia features of Windows 95 included on the CD-ROM edition, including this nice 3D game called Hover. Now this was really a combination of Capture the Flag and Bumper Cars, and this was such a classic that Microsoft even brought it back as a browser-based game in 2013. Sadly that's since closed down, but a lot of Windows 95 fans have got memories of playing Hover, I'm sure. And of course, we've got Weezer's Buddy Holly music video on the CD as well, to show Windows 95 video playing capabilities. I always thought this was a bit weird, and I was never quite sure how this ended up on there and kind of what that conversation was. It did seem quite a random thing to license, but I guess, I don't know, there's a big Weezer fan inside Microsoft at the time, but for me, I can never hear this song without thinking of Windows 95. And you had the Plus Pack, which was an optional add-on set that you could buy for $49.99, and in here you got a bunch of extra themes and icons and lots of ways that you can make your desktop look completely different. Anyone remember all these themes that were included? And this one was always my favourite. And this was the era when everything seemed to install annoying toolbars all over your desktop as well. And with the Plus Pack, we got a really nice 3D pinball game included called Space Cadet Pinball that is still fun to play to this day, and really was just there to be a demo of the Windows 95 graphics engine. And the first versions included the Internet Jumpstart Kit. Now this is where things started to get a little bit shady. You see, at the time, the most prominent web browser was a commercial product called Netscape Navigator. And during the development of Windows 95, a little thing started to gain popularity called the World Wide Web. But it was really a bit too late for Microsoft to initially make it a central part of the OS, as it wasn't really until May of 1995, just 3 months ahead of the release of Windows 95, that Bill Gates really got the internet.
But you know, I think about this, and what about this internet thing? Do you know anything about that?
Sure.
And he posted his famous Internet Tidal Wave memo internally to Microsoft, along with their plan to dominate the internet, and really they turned all their sights on Netscape. Now, I will put a link to the PDF in the video description if you want to read it in full. And their included web browser in the Plus pack was Internet Explorer. Now, this used code from Mosaic by Spyglass Inc. There was an early commercial web browser that used some of the code from the NCSA version of Mosaic as well. Microsoft licensed this technology, but shortly after decided to bundle Internet Explorer with Windows 95, and then meaning that because it was given away free of charge, they didn't have to pay much in royalties to Spyglass Inc., which resulted in a lawsuit and Microsoft giving them an $8 million payout to buy out future royalties. And as if that wasn't enough, Microsoft then tried to argue that Internet Explorer was now an integral part of Windows 95 and they couldn't easily remove it. And of course, giving away Internet Explorer for free meant that Netscape was practically driven out of business as their market share dwindled, leading Netscape to form the Mozilla project and giving away their source code and browser for free, and then of course going on to form the Firefox web browser that we know today. And this was a pretty brutal time, along with a few schoolboy pranks like Microsoft dumping a large Internet Explorer E symbol on the lawn outside Netscape's offices after the launch of Internet Explorer 4, which Netscape then knocked down and put their Mozilla mascot on top of. This famous first browser war led to an antitrust case that came very close to the US government breaking up Microsoft for being a monopoly. But Microsoft's business practices aside, Windows 95 really was a breath of fresh air for PC users of the day. Now, of course, all 90s kids remember using programs like Encarta at school, when CD-ROM felt so revolutionary and you could check out all the new multimedia features on the latest release of it as well. And Mavis Beacon was still teaching a new generation of kids how to type. Microsoft Office, of course, got an upgrade with the new Windows 95 user interface, and this is still actually one of my favourite versions of Office to this day. So that's a nostalgic look back at Windows 95, but what about today? Could I actually use Windows 95, this 25-year-old operating system, to do my day job in 2020? We'll have a go at that next. And I really hope you've noticed recently, but on my channel, I've been trying to up the quality of my videos and my production values in general on my channel. And this video is sponsored by my good friends at Skillshare, and their online classes are a fantastic way of learning new skills and improving your existing ones. And Skillshare are a huge online learning community where millions of people come together to take their next step in their own creative journey. And they've got thousands of classes designed for creative and curious people on all kinds of topics from illustration, design, photography, video freelancing, and lots more as well, all in easy to digest parts. Now, I use Final Cut Pro X as my main video editing suite, and there is a fantastic course by Ali Abdal that will take you from being a Final Cut beginner to a YouTuber. And I've actually been picking up loads of great tips on here, from doing stuff like animated handwriting with iPads, color grading, tips for adding in B-roll video effectively, desktop screen recordings. So if you ever wanted to start your own YouTube channel or improve your existing skills on Final Cut, it really is invaluable. And that's just one of the amazing classes on Skillshare, which is also incredibly affordable, especially at the moment when lots of us are working from home. It's a great way to learn with your extra time that you might have right now, and a lot cheaper than pricey in-person workshops, with an annual subscription being less than $10 a month. Now, I want you to join me on my journey and become part of the Skillshare community, and I've got an amazing offer that you'll have to be quick to claim, as this is strictly limited to the first 500 of my subscribers to click the link in the top of this video's description. If you do that right now, you will get 2 completely free months of premium membership so you can explore your creativity and passion. So claim it quick, thanks to Skillshare. Okay, so is it possible for me to use Windows 95, this operating system that's now 25 years old, to do my day jobs today? Well, the first thing I do every week, as you may know, is edit audio interviews. I do this for my podcast, and I actually know that I can do this because I used to use this exact program to do it back in my college days. I'm going to use Cool Edit 2000. Now, this piece of software was bought by Adobe and today lives on as Adobe Audition. But a lot of the really powerful audio editing features are still here, and they work great. The only thing this really lacks is the multi-track mode that, I'll be honest, I do kind of rely on these days, but from memory I do know that it's certainly possible to do it with manual mixing and volume controls. Admittedly, nowhere near as efficiently or quick as I can do it on my modern setup, but editing a podcast in here absolutely can be done. And the next thing I'll do is obviously make thumbnails for my videos and make the odd meme for social media, that kind of thing. Simple stuff that I generally put together in Photoshop. And here we can run version 5.5 from 1999. Now this was the last version to support Windows 95, and looking at it, it's got pretty much everything I use in Photoshop. We've got layers in there, it can import all the file formats I use, it can do all the sizes, and I could actually use this for basic Photoshop use, and you know what I generally do in my day job with no problem at all. And of course I've already covered Office 95, that would be absolutely fine for script writing and notes, no issues using that at all. But video editing is a completely different matter. Now, I did find a version of Adobe Premiere that is meant to work with Windows 95, but try as I might, I couldn't get the CD image to work by mounting it or even burning it to a disk. I think the image must be corrupt or some like really weird file format, but I couldn't find a copy anywhere else other than archive.org. That said, this is a simulated 64 megabyte system with a 166 MHz Pentium Pro, and that was actually pretty generous specs for the time. It's not going to handle 4K or 1080p video from my iPhone. I mean, to be fair, it barely plays the Weezer video, so I think editing video on this, realistically, is going to be a no-go. But the biggest problem I thought I would have is internet access, but that turned out actually to be quite surprising. Now, connecting such an old machine or operating system to the internet is generally unadvisable, as all the security exploits are out there, and obviously it's not been patched for like 20 years. But that being said, even though I wouldn't do your internet banking on it, most attacks are not really targeting Windows 95 anymore, so you kind of get security through obscurity in that regard. And the biggest issue with using old web browsers today is they're generally not compatible with modern security protocols, so you can't actually connect to a lot of modern websites. However, I did find that there is an up-to-date web browser, believe it or not, that works well with Windows 95, and it's called RetroZilla. Now, this was last updated only around a year ago, and it's got things like updated NSS and TLS 1.2 support, and actually, I find even though it's quite slow, it does work with most websites just fine. And that includes social media networks. Now, Facebook and Twitter's main websites are a little bit heavy for a 64 megabyte 25-year-old computer, but it turns out the mobile versions actually work reasonably well. So if I needed to, I could actually do social media posting from here with a bit of effort, but it would be possible. So in all honesty, I'm actually quite surprised by how usable Windows 95 still is, and although Windows 10 has of course got 25 years of development over 95, a lot of Windows 95 still holds up quite well, and a lot of the basics are already there, obviously just more developed things that were born in Windows 95, proving what a lasting and well thought out operating system it really was. And of course Windows 95 is going to celebrate its 25th birthday this year, which admittedly does make me feel quite old. Still having, really vivid memories of reading about it in magazines and being really excited when I first got to try it. And I thought I'd be one of the first people to get in there and do a 25th anniversary video. So happy 25th birthday Windows 95. If you've got any memories of it, I would love to hear those in a comment. And if you've enjoyed this video on YouTube, I do actually do a weekly retro gaming and technology podcast. Admittedly, not usually edited in Windows 95, but we have veterans on the show each week, and if you want to get it, you can just download it from your favourite podcast client of choice, search for the Retro Hour podcast, or head to our website at theretrohour.com. And while you're here on YouTube, you might want to check out another one of my videos, and if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, maybe consider supporting me on Patreon. Thank you for watching, I'll see you next week.